Ashe everybody, this is Ashe Orisha making another video for all of my wonderful viewers and everyone who is interested in the Orisha magical spiritual community. This video is a very important one that I want to speak with you guys about, okay? This video is called Expansion of the Orisha Faith. And I want to speak about this because these are certain points that I want to bring out to everyone who watches me and everyone who is interested in this topic of conversation. And I want to go over it so that we can compare or so that we can speak about some of the expansions that the Orisha faith is having in this country, in the United States, and that it's having all over the world, including Cuba, which is considered the Mecca by now, the Mecca of Orisha, and the motherland, which is Africa. So, when the slaves were brought, when they were taken from Africa to the Caribbeans and particularly into Cuba, the slaves had no other option but to mix their faith with that of Catholicism, and the fact that the faiths mingled so well was a big part in the expansion in Cuba of the Yoruba faith and the Orishas and the new form of worship, etc., that we nowadays call Lukumi. In Cuba, we speak Spanish. Here in the United States, we speak English, or the main language is English. As later on in the years, a few years ago, usually or mainly in the 1980s, when El Mariel happened, when a lot of Cubans migrated from Cuba to Miami and to the United States, obviously they brought with them the Orishas, and they brought with them all of their magic and all of their wisdom and their religion and their faith, etc., etc. And then it began to take root up in this country. By now, we have so many English-speaking people in the faith, and so many English-speaking Americans and blacks, or blacks, people who are black, who are turning from the Christianity side back to their African roots, back to their African religions, and a lot of people who are American, who are whites, who no longer feel comfortable with certain faiths, Catholicism and Christianity or something, because they feel too restricted, that they're turning to other pagan forms of religion. Part of the pagan form of religion being Orisha. Some people do not consider Orisha to be pagan. I do. I consider everything to be pagan. Anything and everyone who worships nature in one way or the other, I consider them to be pagan. Some people want to argue that they're not, but that is up to debate. So with this expansion, I can tell you guys that there are so many people from all over the world, from all backgrounds and forms of backgrounds and ethnicities and different languages and whatnot, who are initiating into Yoruba, into the Yoruba faith, into the Lukumi faith. And there is such a huge expansion of the faith and of the religion and of the crafts and the arts and the manifestations of the Orisha that is going on, that we have to speak about it, and we have to bring it to light to the universe, and we have to bring it to light to the public, so that everybody thinks about this, and hopefully everybody will start speaking about this with each other. Okay. The expansion that I'm speaking about is the expansion of the actual faith and the expansion of the practices of the religion. Back in the day in Cuba, there were a lot of ceremonies that were lost. There were a lot of rituals and Orishas, the cults of Orishas and receptions of Orishas and things like that were lost due to people, slaves and Africans, keeping the secrets to themselves and them dying out and never sharing the secrets. So thus the certain knowledge never expanded. Nowadays, we have so much communication with Africa, and we have so many communication with each other, and thanks to the internet, thanks to YouTube, thanks to Facebook and Twitter and all those things that are out there, that people can communicate with everyone, with people from all over the world. There has been a lot of reintroduction back into the Lukumi faith of certain worship of certain Orishas and certain ceremonies and certain beliefs and certain things that we need to speak about it, that we need to go over, and that I want to bring everyone to light. For example, a huge expansion that has happened in this country. We have to realize that Cuba is a country that for many years now has had a huge lack of goods and a huge lack of materials. You know, there's a lot of poverty in Cuba, or just simple, simple lack. It lacks things. For example, very simple things. It lacks beads. It lacks cloths. It lacks food. So, and then we come to this country, and as the Orishas travel to this country, in the United States, there's immense amounts of everything. There's just, exuberant amounts of things. So obviously the faith, as people initiated back into the faith and as people began practicing the faith, the Orisha has expanded. One big expansion that I want to bring to you guys' attention is the expansion of the Igbodun, the expansion of the Ocha room. As you guys can see, and if you guys have seen in my videos, for example, I'm one of them. I'm one of the people who has many Orishas received, and I worship them all, and I do things with them all, and I birth them out to people, and I birth them out to my godchildren, and I encourage this expansion. And I want to bring you guys to light, because back in the day, in Lukumi, there was an Igbodun, an Orisha room, usually carried anywhere from 10 to maybe 15 Orishas at most. Most people had 10 to 15 Orishas. Whereas nowadays, the common believer of the Lukumi faith tends to have anywhere from a minimum of 15 to 25 plus Orishas. And that is such a huge thing. And I want to bring you guys to this awareness. The lack of materials in Cuba and the lack of certain knowledge and wisdom contributed to the lack of certain worship. Now that we have expanded back up and we have all this communication, and we're in this country that there's all these many things, the worship of many Orishas have once again sprung up and expanded. So there are Orishas that I have received, that I worship, that I birth, that in Cuba a few years ago were not being worshipped, or very small amount of people even had. Some of you are going to disagree with me in that particular point, but I'm going to make it very obvious. The Orisha Oshumare is one of them that I want to point out specifically in the Lukumi community, that was reintroduced back into the Lukumi community, because in Cuba it was lost. Either people didn't know who Oshumare were, or they didn't know how to worship Oshumare, or they didn't care to worship Oshumare, or they just didn't have the ability to worship Oshumare. Whereas nowadays, Oshumare has been reintroduced through several means. People that have traveled to certain places, to Africa, into Brazil, and they have brought it back to the United States, and they have taken them to Cuba, and they have done all these things. There are other people who have gotten the Orisha and the Fundamento, they have birthed it out of Osain. If that doesn't make sense to you, don't worry about it, but it does make sense to other people. And people who have birthed it out of Osain, and the Orisha is all over now, okay? There are thousands of people by now who worship Oshumare once again, and I'm so thankful, because that is one of the Orishas that I wanted the expansion to happen on. And there's so many offerings and things being done to Oshumare that 50 years ago were not being done in the Lukumi tradition. And although there are certain individuals out there who practice Lukumi who want to argue that point with me, the truth is the truth, and the fact is the fact, that Oshumare was lost in Cuba and Oshumare got reintroduced back to Cuba, okay? This expansion that I'm speaking about is the expansion of materials. In this country, we have so many beads, and we have so many cloths, and there's so much food, and there's so many things, and there's incredible amounts of things that we can use, and there's knives and swords and crowns and bangles, and we can do all these things that the Orisha has expanded so much. And so many people are coming in, and there's so much arts and crafts and so many of those things happening that we cannot deny the fact that the Orisha is growing immensely in this country, and we are all part of it because we're the ones who are here now. We are the future of, we are now the present, but we are going to be the future elders of the religion. And with our expansion, with our consciousness expansion, and with our material goods expansion, the religion is just growing immensely. And I look forward to 30 or 40 more years down the road to see how much the Orishas have expanded, and how many more people have joined, and how the Boduns look of other people, etc., etc. For example, the Orisha Olosa, who one of the paraphernalias of Olosa is a crocodile head. There's no crocodile heads in Cuba. There might be now from people sending them over, but here in the United States, you can go to any type of shell, marine type of aquatic, nautical type of store, and there might be alligator heads right then and there that you can get for the worship of Olosa and for the consecration, etc., etc. So that is another tiny little thing that I want to point out to people, that nowadays there are so many priests and priestesses of Orisha who have received Olosa, that back in the day, 50, 60 years ago in Cuba, there was either no one who had it, or it was a very small amount of people who had Olosa. Now there are so many Orishas that are being worshipped besides the main five, which would be the main five pillar Orishas of the Lukumi faith are Elegua, Obatala, Chango, Yemaya, and Ochun. Okay, besides those five Orishas, there's about 5 to 10 more who are considered major or popular. Besides those 15 or so Orishas, there's this whole array of Orishas that were not being worshipped, or very little people even knew about them, that nowadays everyone is becoming aware of all of these Orishas. And I am so thankful for that, because a lot of people who are coming into the religion, who are being introduced to the religion, are from the beginning being introduced to an array of Orishas and an array of forces of nature that I wasn't introduced to when I initiated, for example, and I have 17 years of initiation as of this video. Rituals and ceremonies and forms of worship and forms of decor. Look at me, I'm decorated to the T. I am a diva. So many forms of being, so many people who have so much creativity in the faith are so much more able to expand themselves and show who they are, and become who they want to be in this faith, in this country, and in this time frame that we are in this time period that we are in, that the love for Orisha has just simply, like I said, expanded. It's the only word that I can use. There's an expansion. The worship of many of the Orishas. There are certain things, for example, I'm going to give you guys another simple example that I have in my room right now, and I'm going to get it. For example, very simple things like this, like hats. Making a hat in Cuba becomes so difficult compared to making a hat over here. Finding the palm fonts can become difficult. Finding beads to decorate can become difficult. A thing that happened in Cuba, for example, was the eleques, the necklaces that we wear. For the most part, were from the neck to the belly button. In Cuba, because there was lack of beads, the eleques got reduced to about this midsection here, to about where the rib cage is, or your heart area, because of a lack of beads in Cuba. Whereas here we have, once again, an expansion of beads. We have an array of beads. So eleques have began to go back to neck to belly button, and they have become more embellished. People put quartz crystals, and people put rondelles and tubes and things and dangling things and whatnot. I mean, look at my jewelry that I'm wearing, for example. This is beautiful jewelry that has been handmade with Orisha in mind, that cannot be done in Cuba because there just simply isn't any of these. And now when you go to places, people's ideas have become the idea, the bracelet, the Orisha bracelet, have become more elaborate, and there's more things. And I want to bring you guys to that awareness. This is why I keep saying it over and over again in this video, is because a lot of English speaking people who are turning to this faith, to this religion, are coming into it with their language, hence why I'm making this video in English, and they're coming into it with their backgrounds. There's a lot of pagans, there's a lot of Wiccans, Druids, and whatever, Jewish people who are joining a Hispanic faith, which is Lukumi, a Cuban faith, which is Lukumi. And so one, you guys tend to find it a little bit harder to understand certain things, which is why we're doing videos in it, why I'm doing videos in English. But two, all of these backgrounds that are coming into the religion are giving a flavor to the religion, which is what I said. In 30 or 40 years, I look forward to seeing how much more the religion has expanded and how much more Igboduns and how elaborate we can get with our thrones, and how elaborate we can get with our celebrations, and how elaborate we can get with our gowns. You know, there's so much material, there's so many cloths here that are being imported, that gowns can just become so elaborate and so beautiful and so intense, and they are becoming, as I said, that in 30 years my mind is blown to the fact of what could the religion be by then. However, I do want to say this though. An expansion of the faith does not equate lack of faith. It does not mean that because more people are joining in, that the religion should be diluted or whitewashed or whatever. The faith, our faith, Lukumi faith, has protocols, which is another thing that I keep talking about in many of my videos. It has protocols and it has ways, and it has certain dogmatic things, which is what creates the tradition of the faith, and that must be maintained. This is why you should always find a legitimate house to worship in and to do things with and to initiate into, so that you actually learn Lukumi faith. This expansion that I'm also speaking about is an expansion of people's consciousness. There's so many more things to think about here versus Cuba. Cuba is a place where you need to worry about your food and your clothing and your house, and you know, whether the roof is falling or whether it's steady over you. Here we have better homes and better clothing, and we have other things that we're taking care of, so that we can expand on other subjects. And there's a lot more people, for example, who meditate with their Orishas, and there's a lot more people who commune with their Orishas, and there's just, I have noticed an expansion of people, faith, practices, materials, everything, okay? And I can only imagine that if the Orishas took root in Cuba and they expanded from so simple to so elaborate in Cuba, and then now they came here to the United States, I can only imagine the beautiful tree that Orisha will grow into, or the beautiful, you know, think of the metaphor, the beautiful beauty that the Orisha is going to grow into, considering how big the roots of Orisha can get here. And it is my honest opinion that at this very moment, a lot of people consider Cuba the Mecca of Orisha, or the principal, the main place of Orisha worship, or Lukumi. But it is my honest opinion that the United States will become certain cities like Miami, New York, etc., Tampa, Jacksonville, etc., Houston, Texas, I'm trying to think other areas that I can think of, but all those areas, the United States will become the next major Orisha worship destination, I guess. A lot of people who watch me or who are in Lukumi want to travel to Cuba because they want to see things in Cuba and they want to experience things in Cuba, and they make this big hype about Cuba because it's where the Orishas came from to the United States mainly now, you know, besides Africa. And I honestly feel that with all of this bringing over, with all of this expansion, the United States will definitely become the next mecca of Orisha. And there's so many, like I said, there's so many more people joining the religion and joining the faith and practicing and believing and turning their lifestyle to an Orisha lifestyle, that in 30 or 40 years, I'm sure that there's just going to be so much more beautiful things to see and to experience within this faith and whatnot. The amount of Orishas in an Igbodun, the amount of Orishas that a person receives and has increased so much, and that is such a big thing of the faith, a big thing of the expansion, that I have gone into so many people's houses by now, and besides their main Orishas, they have all of these other Orishas that the Muls receive, that it thrills me to see. It thrills me to know that I am not the only one who has so many Orishas. And it thrills me that all of the newcomers are being so open to the array of faith, the array of Orishas that are worshipped within the Lukumi faith, the array of Orishas that were always worshipped but we lacked cult of in Cuba for so many years, that now has expanded. Another Orisha, for example, being Logun Ede. There's so many people who have Logun Ede nowadays, and there's so many people who do things for Logun Ede that 50 years ago we were not doing. In Candomblé it's a whole different version, because they've always had Logun Ede and they've always had Oshumare. But in Lukumi we did not. Other Orishas like Akoide, for example, is a very simple Orisha that just came to mind. So many people have Akoide nowadays. So many children of Yemaya have Akoide. Akoide has gained so much more strength. And I love that Orisha. And Ayao. Ayao is a beautiful Orisha that has gained huge amounts of popularity amongst the worshippers of the Lukumi faith after it was reintroduced back into the faith. And I am pro-expansion, you guys. I have always been, and I guess I will always be. I'm pro-expansion, but maintaining the tradition. Do not change tradition, because then it's no longer tradition. That's the whole point of a tradition, is that it maintains from one generation to the other, one person to the other. That's what creates a link between us all. Orisha is such a wonderful religion, such a beautiful path, such an intense lifestyle, that obviously it works for me, it obviously works for many of you who are watching me, that we have to be aware of this expansion, of all these people coming in, of all these backgrounds coming in. And it is our duty as the current priests and priestesses of this faith to make sure that we give the best possible reputation to the faith, and we clean the faith back up, because Santeria, the name Santeria has gained a lot of negative connotations due to the media, and due to people's behavior, and due to people's silliness and lack of knowledge. There's so many books printed, there's so many videos of people speaking, not just mine. There's so many things going on, that we all need to be aware of this beautiful expansion that Orisha is going through. If Orisha was this small or this big a few years ago, this is a metaphor, of course. If Orisha was this big a few years ago, in 30 more years, Orisha will have reached a whole different level of intensity and worship and manifestation within this country. And I look forward to it. Whomever you are that is watching me, as you come into this faith, as you come into religion, as you come into the Orisha religion, always be open. Realize the different iles have different ways of practicing and different ways of doing things. But always be open to the expansion of Orisha, and do not try to keep Orisha in a box. Orisha will not allow itself to be in a box. It was in Africa, it expanded to Cuba and all of the Caribbeans, it expanded to the United States, it has expanded to all over the world, it will expand all over the universe, because faith that works expands. Okay? So I want to talk to you guys about that particular topic, bring all of you to this awareness of this expansion. And I would like to hear from all of you who watch me, what expansion have you noticed in the Orisha community? Have you noticed something that is being done nowadays that it was not being done 30 years ago? Have you noticed Do you know the other people who you would have never thought who practice the religion? Who would have, you would have never thought that would practice this religion, but you have now met. I would love to hear all these things. I would love to hear your opinion on this expansion. I would also like to hear the opinion of any type of English speaking alagwalagwa of the faith who would like to share something of that they have noticed that the newer generation of priests, myself included, are doing that now that they weren't doing back when they were younger. So expansion is always good, in my opinion. Expansion is always good as long as you know where you're expanding to and how you're expanding. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Let there be expansion of Orisha. Let there be expansion of prosperity and wealth and health in your life. And let there be expansion of everything that is good and holy upon this earth. So thank you guys so much for watching me. Please remember that I do private classes for the religion, on the faith, etc., and different topics. You can message me about it. Please look me up on Facebook and add me, and you can just search me under Ashe Orisha, or send me an email at sweetonyidesigns@gmail.com. Thank you guys so much for watching me. Let there be expansion. Thank you guys. Ache, 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 to. Jewelry pieces for this video were courtesy of Orisha Couture by Bati Lemi.